for module 2. It's not in there, so I'll put it in there. But the module 2 assignments are still up there, and they'll be, I think they're due on the 16th or 17th. So with the math, I'll put it in there, and you guys think there'll be a problem with getting the math done in like a week? Yeah, okay. So we'll keep the same due date for the math just so we don't get behind. But I'll get it uploaded this afternoon on that. What I want to do today, we'll do a little work on the farm to help out with the tomato plants, and then Grow Goods grow site, which is at the end. It's about an acre or two. We're going to help them a little bit with the soil stuff there. And then the third part is I want us to start or put together a plan for putting end walls on the greenhouse. So we'll put together a parts list, the cost to do it. Then I can ask Rob's new boss if we can have some money. But the idea, we'll get the parts to build end walls, because at least an end wall to where smaller animals can't get into the greenhouse. Because once you start putting plants in there, rabbits love to go in there. There's not really coyotes out here, I don't think. Is there? And so, but not to seal it up, but ideally just to make it harder for smaller animals to get in. We won't keep the mice and the rats out, but and maybe put a door on it, but get something on the ends, and then when it maybe cools down, maybe put plastic on the side, but ideally just get it somewhat enclosed in. And what we're going to do is, a few of you might not be familiar with just building things in general, so we'll go over the tools that we'll use, because ideally we'll build it. So we'll figure out the parts we need. I'll find a way to get the parts, and then then we'll do the building on that. And so, but what I did want to do is I wanted to go over kind of some basic tools we'll use to build. And the only reason I bring this up is because I've had students not figure out how to use a hammer before. And I'm like, all right, maybe not everybody grew up having to build stuff and so on. So for some of you guys, this stuff might be easy, but overall, I want everybody to know how to use a tape measure, know how to use a hammer, screwdriver. When do we use this tool versus this tool? What's the difference between pressure treated wood and regular wood? You know, and so those are things that if you're ever going to build your own greenhouse structure, you want to have the basics at least on that. And so, but that being said, any questions before we get started on the building out part? Okay, so what we'll do is I'm going to go over just, I figure I might as well just bring in my tool bag and you guys can see this random stuff that I use almost every day, either fixing a greenhouse or fixing stuff in general. Because if you get property and you're fixing stuff, you usually have to be a jack of all trades. You got to know how to rewire an outlet, know how to fix the poly if it gets torn, how to put in a post with an auger, and those are things that we just might not know how to do yet. And so we kind of got a little informal class with the gas powered tools, how to start those. I do have another chainsaw. I wanted to show you guys the difference between the two different types of chainsaws, and then we'll use those tools again throughout the next few weeks. I want you guys to get familiar with starting a weed whacker that's gas powered. Even though in California they'll be banned eventually, I think, but until they're banned gas powered, I think is the superior way to go.
You don't ever have to change the blades for
On a chainsaw?
on the weed whacker.
Oh yeah, that's a great point. Because I had realized when you were using it, I was like, maybe he's never had to change the string before on that. And then also, most of your gas powered weed whackers have a blade attachment, so you can take off the string and put, because you guys have seen some of the weeds out here just are really big, and the string just taps it. Really, it's not really going to cut through it. So we have a blade attachment that can go onto it, where if you stuck your toe down there, it definitely would cut your toe off. And so, but ideally, you're not having to, get a separate tool to take down the bigger weeds on that. So, but the first thing I want to go over is a tape measure. And so, take two of these back. You can pass those back there. There's two of them, and there's two here. And what I wanted to show you guys, let's see here. I should have a fifth one here. How many we got? We got 4 or 5? 4. All right. I'm going to stay yours for a second. So when you buy these, right, there's small, large, there's a whole section of them when you go to Lowe's, right? One's orange, one's black. One has a clip, one doesn't. When you buy these, you're never going to want to buy one less than 16 feet. All right, it's not very functional if you're going to build a shed, a greenhouse. They'll usually will go up to 30 feet. but sometimes the 30-foot tape is just too big when you're just doing small stuff. 16 foot's great. It's always going to have a belt clip on here. These are handy, but not that handy when you're doing a lot of work. What I end up doing is if I have to build a shed, I'll just get like a little pouch and I'll just drop it in.
Where
So-
your vest?
My vest too, but I got an actual pouch too. I got a pouch and a vest. But the idea is I don't like unclipping it and unclipping it over and over again. And so I just have a pouch that'll go in. You have the actual tape itself. If you pull it out the full 16 feet, it'll probably break. There's a spring in here. When you extend it to the full 16 feet, I think it will cause a problem. If I know I'm doing work, say with boards that are over 16 feet, I'll just get a 32-foot tape and use that one. They always have a lock on it. All right, so you press that lock, obviously it locks it out, and then it'll go back. If you keep your finger here, when you let it go back, it's going to pinch it. All right, and so when you pull it out, make sure your finger's clear. And then if you just want to hold it real quick and not lock it, you just put your finger there, and then it'll stay out. And so you lock it, and then if you guys actually look on the tape, you're going to have, and it might be different for different brands, but you're always going to have your foot marks or your feet. So we have 1 foot here, 2 foot here. This one is handy. I don't know if they all do it, but this one actually gives you the measurements 1/8, 1/4, 3/8. I don't know if they all have it on there. But there's going to be 16 lines within every inch. So an inch is broken down into 16 parts. So when I say a ½ inch, that's 8 out of 16 of those marks. If I'm doing a 1/4 inch, it's 4 of the 16. Now, you don't really have to count them unless you're really doing some really fine woodworking, but ideally you want to get close. With this one, it actually gives it to us. So if I say I want a 7½ inch piece of wood, I go to 7, and you see the ½ inch, which is in red right there. Don't ask me about metric, because I don't know enough about how that works, because we just don't use it out here much. But if you go international, standards, what they call this, inches is more of a U.S. thing. Everything's going to be a metric elsewhere. And then, so obviously 12 inches in a foot. And then, anybody know why this 16 is red on this tape measure? The 16 has a red block around it. Any idea on why?
I think it's because when you do construction,
Mm-hmm.
the space between the studs
Yep.
are 16 inches.
Exactly. So when you're building a house, there's a standard industry that studs are spaced out 16 inches. And so this is just telling you, if you're going to measure, if you have your board on the ground and you want to run your studs, you can do your tape measure, put this at the end, and you already have it marked. And so it's easier to figure out where. And then, so we have that already marked, so 16 inches on center. And what happens too is when you're measuring from stud to stud, if we take a piece of wood, say this is our stud here, and we have one here, and we have one here, when you're doing 16 inches, it's always on center, which means that you're going to start on the center of the board, and the next one will end on center too, because that way there's a uniformity throughout the whole the whole wall there. And what happens too is when the drywall guys are putting the drywall up, they usually know by default every 16 inches there'll be a stud, so they can put the screws there or the nails. All right, so we have that, and then obviously we have our inch markers, our feet, our 16 inches. All of our fractions are there already. Most of the time when you're building greenhouses or sheds or small houses, if you're off by a 16th, it's not a big deal. It's such a small amount, and so usually you can be off by about 1/8 of an inch. If you're building cabinets, then it becomes a big deal, because these gaps will start to show up. But ideally, when we're building kind of rough-in type things, if we're off by a little bit, it's not really a huge deal here. There is debate on you guys' tape measures. This tip will probably move. All right. So some people say, well, this will mess up the measurement, and this type of work it won't, because it's such a small amount. But what happens is when you want to measure something, when you pull it, that end is extended out, and so this is saying it's 6 feet. If you push this in, it would be off by maybe a 1/16 of an inch. So it's not really a big deal, at least with this type of work. If we're making cabinets or furniture, then this is a big deal on that. So, and then sometimes there's information on the back too. Does anybody have anything on the back of their tape? Yep.
Yes.
So that one does. So this one that Nikki has here is pretty handy, because you got the measurements on the front here, but then it has them on the back too. So for some reason, you had to hook something or it flipped over, I can still tell because the numbers on the backside. And you guys can see too, you see this, how wide that tape is. So this is a really wide tape measure here. What's the advantage of having it really wide versus a skinnier one?
You can have it go longer.
Yeah, so you're extending out, and let me see, how wide is yours? You got a pretty wide, about the same. So this is, I think, is the widest one. And so what happens, this is a 16-footer. If I'm trying to measure a board, let's say it's like 10 feet, sometimes if the tape is cheap, I get this far, and then it snaps. And so it becomes really annoying if you're trying to get way out there. And so usually when they're fatter, you can go pretty far before it'll start to break. So we can go about, let's see how far we can go. So we're at about 12 feet. You think we'll get to 13?
Yeah.
I think we're going to break before 13.
Yep.
No, we're good, we're good. We might get to 13. Oh, we're at 13 too. Okay, hold on. Let's see if we can get, let's go to 14. I'm kind of helping it too on the side here, but there we go. About 14 feet. But the idea is, if I'm trying to measure a 12-foot board, if I keep snapping at 6 feet, it's super annoying. I mean, you got to walk down there, you got to do it, and and snap it on there. But the idea is that they have a name for it, but how far it'll go out before it snaps will be dependent on the actual width of the actual tape itself. And so, and then if you guys feel this one, it has a coating on it. I don't know if you guys, if yours has the same on it. Compared to this guy here, there's no clear coat over it. And so that might help with the rigidity, maybe just the durability. This tape measure is a lot less expensive than that one, but I tend to lose these a lot, so I don't really spend a whole bunch on them. And so it's something, and then I find a 16-footers is handy because it's not that big or heavy compared to, I think, Martin, is yours a 30-footer or? 25. Yeah, 25. It's just if you take this one here, you can feel the weight. It's just a different weight, and if you got to carry one all day long, and I'm only doing 8-foot boards, it just makes sense to do the small one. Thank you. So yeah, so they always have this hook on the end. Some are magnetic, which are nice because if you're trying to measure something that might be metal, it'll stick to that end, assuming it's not aluminum. That's handy. And then I think, let me see this one real quick. This one is kind of neat too because, see, this one is solid at the bottom here. This one has this gap here. So what it does is, I was telling you I'll hold this out and I'll use my finger just to stop it. They actually made this spot for your hand. And so you just do that. So it's something you do automatically, but they kind of added in here.
You gotta worry about catching the thing.
Yeah, well you learn real quick to move it when it snaps back. Thing is too is they're always going to have a measurement of how wide the tape measure is most of the time. Oh, here we go. So this one says that it is 2 13/16, just to make it hard, not just be 3 inches. So what this is saying is this width is about 3 inches. And so if I'm measuring the inside of a wall, I can basically extend this out to one wall, push this side to the other wall, and then add that 2 13/16 is what this one is to know the actual width. What I'd probably end up doing is I wouldn't use that. I'd probably just put this over the wall and just have it go up until I hit that point. The measurement isn't quite exact because there's an arch on the bottom, but the idea is that they always tell you the width of the actual tape measure so you can account for it. So this one is 3 1/4 on there. And so, and you can see on this one I actually took the clip off because it's easier to put into a pouch on that. And so, and then that one, it's not actual metal, it's a plastic shell. That one I find easier to put into a pouch because the rubber ones are hard to get out. And so that one works well. And then, but yeah, not a whole lot to it. Some people will put string on the back here so it's easier to grab out, but it's something that if you're building anything, you're going to use this over and over again. You can, but I find them kind of hard to read, and I'm not 100% sure where it's hitting. Sometimes it'll have a dot, but if it's really bright outside, it's hard to see. And so these kind of never fail on you, and so at least for the most part. They have them where you can do, like if I'm measuring the inside of a window and I need it down to the 16th, I'll use those because you just put it inside there as a little laser it shoots. It'll tell you 27 inches and 7/16 or something like that. And so, but general building, I don't think I've ever seen anybody use a laser more than a few times. Next tools are pretty handy. Anybody know what this thing is called? Not really.
This is great.
Scraper's close. They call it a 5-in-1. It technically has 5 jobs. It has like a scraper, a nail puller. Any idea on what this curve is for? Chris? No? So when you paint and you're cleaning your roller, you have your roller full of water, you can push this over to push all that paint out. So you got the roller cleaner, scraper. This is, it's not really a sharp edge. This does something. Nail puller, bottle opener if you're having a beer. So they call it a 5-in-1 because it has,
So that's a nail
it has,
puller.
technically has 5 jobs, even though the newer ones probably have 15 jobs, but a 5-in-1 is like the general rule, what they call it. And then you always want to get one with the metal backing because you're going to hit it with a hammer to scrape up stuff. There's some with the plastic one, but it's something that those last just a few months. You can pass that around. And so 5-in-1 is what they call that one. Obviously, we know this is a utility knife. This has an auto feed where you can actually just press this red button and the blade will come out to change it out. I'm not a huge fan of that because it's just more stuff to break and they usually get all clogged up. But you definitely want a fresh blade when you're working with the plastic on the greenhouse. This one has I think a storage spot back here, but these are fine. I mean, I usually just try to find the ones with the fattest grip because it's nice to hold. There's some that are skinny, but these blades are cheap, but ideally you're gonna have to have one of these tools here. Now you guys know what this is. Any reason why it's not round? Like why would they make it square?
Because you can get between the wall.
That's close. You got an idea, Martin? Use that, but when I put it on a table, it doesn't roll off. So they make them square. And then the nice thing about it is these are always a 1/2 inch wide. A 1/2 inch this way, a 1/4 inch this way. So when you're doing fencing, say you're putting planks up, you can actually use this as like your jig to make sure the planks are spaced exactly the same. So what I'll do is I'll basically, if I put up a fence, I'll put a board up, I'll put this here, I'll put the board over, and then I'll nail it in. As long as you use the same device the whole time, it works great. So, and then Martin had a point, well, how do you sharpen this? Well, the way these are shaped, you just take your blade and you scrape the wood off there. And then you have a blade here on that, or a lead. If the lead is too dark and I need like a more prominent line, I just use a Sharpie on that. Obviously, screwdriver here. This is going to get beat up too, so get one you can hit a hammer with. They always have at least 4 sides to it. You have a small, anybody know what this head's called? Yes. Yep. So it's the Phillips. Maybe Philip was the guy that invented it. I don't really know. It's going to have a flat head side. Flatheads I hate. They're a waste of a screw. But back in the day, this was the main screw, so you'll see it on light sockets and random stuff. But no one buys screws nowadays with a flat head on it unless you hate everybody. And so the Phillips head, and then I must have did something with this at one time. And then the other side, it'll have just a larger size. So you got your flat head and your Phillips here. And then this size, if you guys ever seen like a hose clamp, the ones that go around like a dryer duct or like a hose, that bolt to tighten it is almost always the same size here. I don't know what the size is, but for some reason it always works. And so before you go grab a socket or a wrench, see if this fits first on there. It's pretty handy. There are some that will be like 18-in-1, they'll have all this other stuff, but I tend to find this size is a good one. You always need a flashlight, all right, to fix stuff, especially when it gets dark. And then see if we can shut it off here. This guy, anybody know what this is called? Adjustable wrench. It's just adjustable so we can open up the mouth. These are always handy to have. This brand, they always have blue handles. I think the brand is Allen, like an Allen key. They work great. And then if you guys ever buy tools, Home Depot's Husky brand is good. Super affordable, and then Most of them have a lifetime warranty on it. So if you break it, you just bring it back to the store. So, and then this pouch I've liked forever because of the Velcro. They stopped making them, but I can usually find them on eBay. And so ideally I'd love to get one made in leather so I can just keep one forever. But I usually go through them every few years on that. So, and then you can't put your tape measure here, but it's so hard to get it in here. It doesn't make a lot of sense on that. It may be for storage, but that's about it. All right, and then some other stuff that we tend to use a lot. I just had to build a set of stairs yesterday, and of course it was super hot, so I'm just frying. I'm like, I'm too old for this shit. But a friend of mine has a home he was selling, and the inspector was like, the stairs are unsafe, so we had to fix the stairs. Are probably the hardest thing to ever build because you got to get the rise and the run exactly right because there's certain codes of that. There's an angle, and you're making turns. You have all these 22.5-degree turns, like 30-degree turns, and so I would rather build a house than build a set of stairs, really. Stud finder, we all probably have used them and hate them because half the time they don't work. This one is magnetic. And any idea why we would use a magnetic stud finder? Being the studs are not metal for the most part.
Stick it on the wall and stuff.
Well, if we go on drywall, it's not going to stick. All right?
It's gonna find the nails.
Exactly. What happens is if we're trying to find a stud, the drywall is always tapped with a metal fastener, whether a screw or nail. So what happens is I'll move this on the wall, and obviously it won't work here because I'm drywall, and then this will find a nail. So if there's a nail, I know there's a stud. Because there's the ones that you kind of go over, has like a light on it. It'll beep when it's there. I never find those work that well.
No.
And so, I've used a dozen of them. I've never found one that's like, oh, this is amazing. This is probably the best one because if there's a nail, I know there's wood there. And so it's something that super cheap, small, has a level, which is kind of pointless. But even if you just had just a magnet, just like a strong one, you could use that too. But this thing works great. The only thing is if you use the metal on the drywall, it's going to make a line. So they put like a plastic shield around it here to make that work. There's that. Use that a lot. If this blade is not sharp enough or I need something really sharp, like if I was going to cut the poly off the greenhouse, I probably would use a blade like this. And so it probably has an actual name, but it's just, you guys see how it has all these lines on it?
Mm-hmm.
Any idea on what that's for? Chris, you can't answer. Exactly. So what happens is once this gets dull, I take the line, put it at the edge there, I take pliers and I snip it off, and I have a fresh blade on it. Works great when you use something really sharp, but not really practical when you're building something because you cut your hand off. It's that sharp. This, you have a cut, but you'll keep your finger on that. Then we have chisel for a lot of times doing doors. You got to chisel out the hole for the actual latch to go into. Have them with a cover so you don't cut your bag. Something else that's used a lot, Nino nose pliers. Obviously the nose is super small, and then the snip stuff, it has little snips in between the edge there. What else is pretty handy? We talked about hitting stuff with a hammer, so it's got a metal head on it here so I can beat the crap out of it. Then snips. Now when you buy these snips, this is usually if you're going to cut any type of sheet metal or something, or maybe any of the sheet metal in a greenhouse or ducting. There is you can buy a left and a right turn snips. And what that means is that when you use them, they work better in one direction or the other. If you ever try to cut metal with snips, it's hard because the metal doesn't move, but the device needs to go through the metal. And so usually you have to push it down or up. And then if you're trying to go left or right, it's really hard to turn it and cut the metal at the same time. So when you buy these, sometimes they'll come as a set of 3. They'll have like a right turn snip, a left turn, and then a straight. And so if you're cutting enough with the sheet metal, it makes a big difference on which direction you're going on that. Adjustable wrench. See what else here. And that's probably, what else is handy? Anybody know what this thing is called? It's a keyhole saw. So if I'm trying to cut a hole in drywall, say to put like a light switch or something, this cuts drywall really quick. And to get it to go through, you just put the point and you hit the back of it, and it'll push through on that. So, and then this one you guys will use a lot, any type of greenhouse. Any idea what this guy's called? This head spins on it. So it's called a reamer. So when I cut a PVC pipe, You guys know all the burrs that are on the inside. What happens is sometimes that's a problem if you're trying to run wires through or if the water's supposed to flow through it because it's kind of a blockage in a way. So what happens once I cut pipe, I'll ream the inside out so it's a nice kind of cambered edge so it's smooth. Pretty common for electrical because if you're ever trying to run wire through conduit and you have that cut piece sticking up, the wire gets stuck. And with water too, you want to get those burrs out because you don't want those to clog the other side of the line on that. So usually when we cut the say the NFT channels or PVC, we'll ream out the inside so it's a nice smooth kind of flow in a way. So, and then that's probably about it. Oh yeah, yeah. I use them if I can on everything. The and on that note, on the power tools, this guy got some good work about a day ago. So I don't know what the official name of this thing is. It's basically just like a power driver or impact driver. So with this guy, pretty simple. Tighten and loosen. Righty tighty, lefty loosey. And so if I have to unscrew a bunch of stuff, I'll just put the right bit on here. This is, they call it a Torx bit. It's, or maybe some people might call it like a star bit. But what happens is when you guys ever try to screw something in and the bit just spins and the screw just stays there and then you strip it out and you're like, oh shit. So Torx bits don't ever really strip out, because I think it's just the way it's made has like 6 points versus just the 4, that you just get more leverage and it just sticks better. And so if I'm ever building a deck or putting together the greenhouse, I'll use a Torx bit over a Phillips head. I never really see it strip out, and then because once you strip it out, it's hard to get it back out, right? Because that screw is like usually it's halfway in there, and so Torx bit's the way to go if I have my choice. And then I'm trying to see if I got any screws in here. I don't think so here. That's what I had. But a Torx bit, and then you have your normal Phillips head here. You have that Torx bit. They come in different sizes, so you guys can see how fat that end is there. So what happens, you guys might have heard of Simpson ties. They're usually used to build larger structures. Nowadays, they use Torx bits for all those large bolts. So instead of using a Phillips head on a large bolt that's going to require a lot of torque, they'll do a Torx bit because the power you get behind it is just a lot more. And so that's our first choice there. Phillips head. Any idea what this guy is here, guys? So what happens when you buy these little bit sets, they come with this magnetic kind of sleeve, right? So there's a magnet in here. You can take your bit and put it in here, but now this has a magnetic tip, and so my screws are going to hang on a little better. Because I'm sure you guys have had your little driver, you put your screw on here, you're about to go in, and the screw falls off. And so that gets real annoying if you got to put in a few hundred. And so the magnetic bit's nice, and then also they have some that have like a sleeve that go over it. But what's nice about this too, we can get it out here. I guess it's in there forever. Let me see, there we go. You can change these out real quick. And so if we want to go from a Phillips to say like a square head, we can switch it out. The this bit, this one is a square head. That one you don't see it used too much. Maybe putting in cement board. It's probably what was around before the Torx bit. But with this driver here, say we're doing some Phillips screws, DeWalt's pretty good because when you want to put your bit in here, it's in there already. Some of them you have to hold it open and then put the bit in. So, but DeWalt did a good job of where I can just change it out, put it in here. It's always usually going to have some type of light on the front, which is great when it's dark. And then, anybody know what this button here is for?
Turn it right or left.
Yep, so it allows us either to tighten stuff or loosen stuff. You switch it. And you usually, once you use it enough times, it's automatic. You can go back and forth on that. And then, what else here? You have your belt clip, which is super handy because things can just hang there if you're doing work with your hands. The battery itself, so this is what they call a 12 volt. And so usually when you buy power tools, they're going to come in a 12-volt size or a 20-volt size. 12-volt is way handier for smaller jobs, but if I'm building a whole house, I might have a 20-volt set. So I have both, but I find this is more handy. It's just smaller, it weighs less. The batteries, you guys have seen them, they're really big. This is a really small battery. And then when they do the batteries, this is what they call 2 amp hours. This one right here, obviously it's fatter. This is a 5 amp hour. So I'm obviously going to get more torque and time out of the larger one on that. I think they're lithium now on the batteries. So they used to be nickel, and lithium is like the new thing now. And so if I'm going to use this, I can get a few hours out of this. This I'll get most of the day out of on that. You'll see they have this brushless thing. Back in the day, there was a brush in here that spin. I don't know if there's a huge advantage for brushless, but that's just the way the tools work. And then other than that, if you're ever going to buy these, the one thing you want to make sure is that you have the batteries, because there's nothing worse than buying one brand and having the batteries for another. And then what I find handy is how short these guys are, because I can get them into tight spots. So the shorter you can get this head, the better. I've seen them maybe as small as that. So if you're trying to get into a super tight spot, it's really easy if the whole device is short. And then other than that, this does have an adjustability on here, so it'll light up. If you can change this depending if you just want to do screws or if you want it low or high. What would be the advantage of having it just on the screw setting here?
Yeah, twerking.
Exactly. So what happens is if I'm trying to put a screw in the drywall and I have this on 2, I'm basically going to put that screw all the way through the paper on the drywall into the gypsum, which is inside. If I do it just on the screw, it's not that much. It lowers the torque. So when I screw it, it's going to stop before I puncture through the paper. On drywall, when you're installing it, if you push through the paper, that's when you see those screw heads stick out. So when you paint or when you press on a wall, you see a little circle pop out there. The idea is the screw was screwed in too far on that. So yeah. So DeWalt's always good. I use a brand for the bigger stuff called Flex. They're not too popular, but they're the only brand not made in China. So they're made in Germany. And so when I was trying to, because whenever you pick a brand, you got to stick with it. So pick wisely in the beginning, because once you go down the DeWalt road or the Milwaukee road, you can't switch. All right. So with Flex, it was great because the batteries worked great, and then the quality was it was built really, really well. All this stuff now is just plastic. All right. So it's easy. Like if you toss this off a second story, it's just going to shatter. Like this part right here, it might be metal, but I wouldn't doubt if it's not. It's like that tape measure. It looks like a metal one, right? It's just a plastic, piece with a chrome on it. And so if you chuck that down the road, it's just going to break on that. So yeah. So whatever brand you pick, definitely stick with it. But ideally, if you can find something not made in China, that's the best way to go. Because most of the time, tools now, unfortunately, are seen as disposable, even the power tools, and so they just don't make them as well anymore. And so if you can find a brand you like, it's definitely the way to go. And the last thing here too, guys, is that I keep these on a quick release because they're used a lot. And so this little thing it'll go in here. Let's see if it'll go. And then it locks in. And these are used a lot when you're using self-tappers. You want to pass that around. So that screw has almost like a little drill bit on the end of it. So what happens is when we use those a lot when we're screwing aluminum to metal in a greenhouse, because we don't want to pre-drill every single hole. So we'll self-tappers, and so we'll use that. That'll drill its own hole, and that way it'll drill and then screw at the same time. And so we usually buy that by the barrel size. They're not super strong if you're trying to hold up a huge metal piece because they're aluminum, so they will snap. But the idea is most of those self-tappers use like a little hex head on them, and what will happen is those will usually find the right size, and it's magnetic, so it's on there, so it's not going to come off. And so we usually have, like, if we're trying to put up a wall on a greenhouse, we'll have these in a big old pouch, and we'll have this just go to town on them, go back and forth. And then it's usually a one-time use too. Once you self-tap it into metal, If you unscrew it and try to self-tap again, the tip is now dull, and so it won't really go in that well on that. So, but yeah, so I just keep this on the side here, just pretty handy to have. And then anybody know what this guy is here? I'll pull it off. Okay.
Sealing tape,
Yep. When would you use this?
to make sure you don't have leaks.
Yep. Usually if there's water or air involved. So this is, or Teflon tape is another name for it. PTFE is the official name for it. But what happens is when you're trying to like thread in a water line, you want to seal the threads, you'll wrap this around. And no more than 2 or 3 times. After that, it kind of gets in the way of that. So it's usually white, but this one is just gray.
How long does that last?
Hopefully for forever, because once it's in there, it's usually solid, and so it's not something you'd have to replace unless if you put it on there, put the pipes together, you run the water through. If it leaks, then there's not a seal with that tape. That tape isn't working, or there's something going on with the threads. If it doesn't leak in the beginning, it's not going to leak ever, really. It eventually would have to rust for it to leak, but the idea is you'll know if there's a leak right at the beginning. It's the same if you ever have to solder any type of copper. Once you solder it, turn the water on. If you don't see a leak, there's not going to be a leak in a year. There might be in like 50 years, but ideally it's sealed on that. So, and then drill bits. I usually find that the drill bits that can fit in this device are way easier than having a whole separate tool with the drill bits. And it works the same way. Piece comes out here, and then that goes in there, and then you drill your hole there. The one thing I don't like is you see how short these are now? They get shorter every year. What happens if you're trying to drill through like 2 boards, it won't go through. It's just it's too short. And then have your sizes, and these they don't really build to last, so these get replaced every probably 2 years. And then the last one here, you guys all know what a hammer is. You guys see how this head here is flat? You can buy them that have like a waffle shape on them. The thing is, if you're building a home, it's great, but if you're